Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Thanks for the wait. Whenever I start the stream early, I end up starting late. That's just how these things tend to work. But thank you for being here. And we've still got a whole night ahead of us. The evening is young, as they say. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have our late night conversation.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We already have one super chat that has come in from Gala. Do you think the EU will lift any sanctions on Russia anytime soon? Any chance of the USA normalizing relations with Russia post-Biden? We appreciate it. And in the second half of our show, we will be answering super chat questions. So, that's the way we do things. Really glad to be here with all of you. I hope you're all having a great holiday season. I really do. I hope that you're holly and jolly and that you're indoors. Look, I'm celebrating because tonight, rather than unnamed water beverage, I'm drinking unnamed orange beverage. Now, I'm going to run out of the orange beverage pretty soon. It's actually some orange soda that I'm drinking. And then when I finish, I'm going to have to go get a cup for my water beverage. But there you go. That's how festive I'm being. Lee Stranahan is in the chat. Shout out to Lee Stranahan. He gave a great talk about Eugene Debs at our recent CPI convention. I am very excited for posting that on the web. Some talks just went up this afternoon. I don't know if people saw, but anyway, I'll be getting to all of that later. I'm getting ahead of myself. We got to do our opening thing. We got to do our introduction, our welcome, welcome, welcome. Just a quick reminder to everybody. The way we do things here on this channel is that I give my opening remarks, which is what I'm doing now. I just talk about what's on my mind. I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. Then after that, after the roll call, then at that point, I start answering your questions. And we're live right now on the Rumble. So if you want to ask me a question on the Rumble, you send a Rumble rant. I'm live right now on the Rockfin. So if you would like to ask me a question on the Rockfin, send me a Rockfin tip. I am live right now on YouTube, where most of you are watching. So if you are on YouTube and you want to ask me a question, send me a YouTube super chat. First one came in from Gala. Great question. I look forward to answering it. So that's the way we do things here. That's the way we do things. So, I always have been starting out our show with some announcements. I'd like to just keep people up to date on things that are taking place and things that are happening. The first big announcement that I want to make is that coming up on February 17th, there will be a very, very important anti-war demonstration in Washington, D.C. At the Lincoln Memorial, thousands of people led by the Libertarian Party and the People's Party will be convening in Washington, D.C. for Rage Against the War Machine Part 2, Defeat the Deep State. And we, the Center for Political Innovation, are sponsors and endorsers of the event. We have already sent in our contribution and registered as supporters. We are waiting for them to update the website. That should be on there soon. Angela's a friend of mine. We've streamed with Angela of the Libertarian Party before. She has a very different perspective than we do on economics, but she is more anti-war than you can believe. She's a friend of the people of the world in their struggle for peace, jobs, democracy, and equality. And so we're very happy. And Nick Brana of the People's Party is also a longtime friend of the Center for Political Innovation. He's spoken at multiple CPI events, given great presentations about the need for breaking the two-party system and the U.S. legal system, and just really, really great stuff. So we love the People's Party. We love the Libertarian Party. We don't endorse any political party as CPI. We are an educational nonprofit. However, we do, as the Center for Political Innovation, we do indeed give a platform to many different political perspectives. So we're all looking ahead to February 17th. That is going to be very, very, very important. And while we're at it, Gala says she would endorse Jimmy Dore. Well, there you go. If he was running, that would make my day. I think Jimmy Dore running would be a great thing. In addition to that, I did want to just let you all know that the Center for Political Innovation, CPI USA, we are a growing organization. And in a couple days, before the end of the year, I will be posting our organizational report of everything that we've accomplished this year. I'll be giving kind of a New Year's update on everything that we did this year, a New Year's update, a New Year's message. So, keep your eye out for that. But I want to say we've grown very significantly this year. I don't know the exact number of new members that we've had this year, but it would be worth looking at. If you compare the amount of members we had on January 1st of last year to the amount of members we have now, I actually don't know what those numbers would be, but it's in the 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s at least, right? As of now, we have 138 members, from what I understand. And I don't know what membership number we were at on January 1st of last year. So we'll have to look into that and figure it out. But I think we have very significantly increased the membership this year, so that would be worth tracking. And we could always use more members. So if you would like to join the Center for Political Innovation, new people are joining all the time. We've had 12 people join so far. Thank you, Lee, for your super chat, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas. We've had 12 people join since our convention. And that was great. And some of those new members I got to spend some time with in Portland. It was really, really awesome to spend time with them in Portland and get to know them. And, we had a follow-up workshop the weekend after the CPI convention. That was really, really awesome. And we're growing as an organization. People are seeing what we're capable of doing. And we could use some new members. And it's $10 a month to be a member of CPI. Not a very high number of membership dues. So if you would like to join, just go to the website, go to cpiusa.org and hit join. We could use you as a new member. So I'm just going to throw that in. Join the Center for Political Innovation. I'll just throw that in. So there you go. Membership is available to anyone who wants to join on the website. There you go. There you go. Yeah, we'd be happy to have you as a new member. So just wanted to throw that one out there. And so, as I said, tonight, the way it works, just like every other night, I give my opening remarks. And that's true. Heidi did join the CPI. I give my opening remarks. And then from there, we do the roll call where I answer and then I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then from there, at that point, I answer people's questions for the rest of the night. Here we got a question right there. So on that note, folks, I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. Just keep in mind the second half of our show, that is when we will be answering people's questions. The second half of the program, that's when we answer people's questions. So keep that in mind. And I guess we will be jumping into the opening remarks for tonight. So I titled this stream Peace in Ukraine Soon, because I don't know if you all are aware of some of the developments that have happened in just the last few days regarding the war in Ukraine. I don't know if you've seen that, but I want to show you a couple clips, right? I mean, you can make of this what you will, right? You can make of this what you will, but I want to show you, remarks that we've got from the White House, remarks that we've got from the State Department about Ukraine, that are interesting to say the least. That don't kind of match the attitude that we've heard from the Biden administration. The Biden administration, they've been all about pouring huge amounts of money into Ukraine. That's what they have been all about for the past, year, 2 years. It's just been, roads in America, no, we don't need that. Schools in America, no, we don't need that. Food stamps, no, we don't need that. Infrastructure, no, none of the stuff that America needs is important, but Ukraine, oh my God, we've got to pile billions and billions and billions of dollars into Ukraine because, oh my God, Putin is evil and Russia's evil and oh my God, right? That has been their approach for the last year, right? It's been nothing but lots and lots of funding for Ukraine while America falls to shit and crumbles, right? They make some noise about infrastructure. They're going to build this or they're going to build that. And Biden gave a great speech, his first joint address that he gave, and he was going to do all this infrastructure, but we haven't seen it. Our roads are still falling apart. Our schools are still crumbling. There's still a lack of the resources people need in order to survive. But whenever it comes to Ukraine, they just have a huge amount of money. And this is what Zelensky believes. Before I show you what the Pentagon has been saying, I guess I'll show you what Zelensky said, because Zelensky, he's adamant that, that this is how we should be spending our money. This is Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, the guy who's running a government that includes special Nazi divisions of its armed forces. And this is what he said to the American people on Fox News. You can't make this up.
Two critics who are saying that.
I say such person from government or mayors think about the war, think about how to defend our people. Don't travel through the world each day. Travel to the front line. Ask people, ask soldiers what they need. Do this. Not build roads for today. Don't do it. Spend all your money to the weapon, to the drones, to the society, to the pensions, and etc. And don't cry. Because you are leaders. And that's it. That's why we are, and that's why we stay, because mostly people are not crying. People stay and fight against Putin. And we don't have any enemies in our country. We can't have time for this. And we don't have it. We have only one enemy. This is Putin. And that's it.
But you'll stand from democracy going forward?
Yes, of course. And of course, because we are really defending democracy and we are really defending freedom.
Mr. President, we appreciate your time, and we'll continue to follow the war.
So, did you hear that? We should not spend as Americans money on roads, money on pensions. No. Only spend money on Ukraine. And he says we have no enemies in our own country. That was just outrageous because they've been bombing the shit out of what they claim are their own people for the last 8 years, right? The whole reason this war started, we all know, is because the eastern regions, the Donbass, declared independence from Ukraine in 2014 after a virulently anti-Russian government was installed by the United States in the Euromaidan coup. And there was the Minsk agreement that was supposed to facilitate de-escalating tensions, allowing the people of the Donbass to speak their own language, to be fair and equal members of Ukrainian society. And the Minsk agreement wasn't implemented. Meanwhile, what was happening was the USA was giving weapons to Ukraine so that they could bomb the shit out of the eastern regions. And of course, mainstream media never tells you this. They never tell you that for 8 years straight, the United States has been bombing Ukraine. The United States has been enabling Ukraine to bomb Donbass and kill all kinds of people. U.S. military advisors, U.S. weapons, U.S. drones, U.S. support has been given to the Ukrainian government so they could bomb Donetsk, Lugansk, the eastern regions, right? And we now, I've shown you that there's a monument to all the children that have been killed by the U.S.-backed bombing of the Donbass region. And after 8 years of bombing in which these people have been killed, Russia has absorbed 2 to 3 million refugees. After all of this, finally, Putin said, all right, we're going to move in and we're going to put a stop to this. And these regions voted then to join with Russia. And Russia recognized their independent government. They had their election. They joined with Russia. And now these are the new republics, the people that Ukraine didn't want, the people that they bombed and destroyed. These children were killed, and thousands of people, we're talking 16, 17, 18,000 people were killed as the Ukrainian government continued its onslaught against the people in the eastern regions. Finally, Russia moved in to protect them, and now these regions have voted to join with Russia, and that's the way things are. And the media in the United States, of course, makes it sound like Russia just moved in because they're evil. Russia just wants to seize territory because they're brutal authoritarians, blah, 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 blah. They do their hardest to try and obscure what this war is really about. This war is about the fact that Ukraine lost its sovereignty in the year of 2014. It had a fanatically anti-Russian government armed and backed and imposed on it by the United States. At which point, then the people in the eastern regions declared their independence, at which time, we then got a situation where the government of Russia felt it had no choice but to move in and protect the people of the eastern regions. And that's what this conflict is really all about. I'm trying to find this clip for you. And I'm getting the clip for you right now. But I want to show this clip to you because it looks like things in Ukraine are headed in an interesting direction. Now, I want to show you this clip. This is Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He gave his end of the year speech, his wrap up of what we're trying to do this year. And so I did a report on it for RT. I'm going to show you my report because what he said in his report is very interesting. And I want to show this to you because this is important. So I guess I'll just show you. I was trying to find the clip by itself, but I guess I'll just show you my reporting for RT that I did a couple days ago when Antony Blinken gave this speech. So this is my report that I did for RT about Antony Blinken's end of the year speech. So I'll just put that on. But I want you all to see how important, the important bombshell that was dropped by Antony Blinken in his speech.
That Israel does not have to choose between removing the threat of Hamas and minimizing the toll on civilians in Gaza. It has an obligation to do both, and it has a strategic interest to do both.
In terms of doing both, many are looking on and watching as the United States is enabling Israel to not only continue to bomb Gaza, but also to maximize civilian casualties as they do it. The reports of the bombing and the targeting and the attacks and the massacres continue to pour in. The death toll at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces is approaching roughly 20,000 people killed. And the United States seems to be in favor of continuing and allowing Israel to continue what they're doing almost indefinitely. We've seen the United States at the UN Security Council vetoing resolutions that call for a ceasefire, basically just allowing at the international body the Israelis to continue to conduct their operations without any international intervention to make them stop or at least slow down. Now, it's also important to note some of what was said by Secretary of State Blinken when it came to the issue of Ukraine.
Now, this is the interesting part. This is what I'm talking about.
There is no magic pot of money that we can draw from. The assistance, the support that we have designated for Ukraine, that is running out. It's running down. We are nearly out of money that we need, and we're nearly out of time. I can't put a precise date on it, but that's the direction that this is moving in. And we have a very clear plan, as I said, to make sure that Ukraine can stand on its own 2 feet, militarily, economically, democratically, so that these levels of support and assistance will no longer be necessary.
An interesting tone that we just heard there from the U.S. Secretary of State. Now, he's saying that money is drying up for Ukraine, and that comes right now as the White House is negotiating with Republicans in Congress to try and get a $60 billion aid package passed. Now, the $60 billion aid package also includes money for Israel, but it's mostly for Ukraine, and Republicans are not excited about it. They are demanding, and the negotiations seem to indicate that they may vote for it in exchange for tougher restrictions at the U.S. border and tighter border controls. But polls show the American people are not really in favor of spending more money on Ukraine. A recent poll showed that 48% of Americans believe the U.S. government has spent too much on Ukraine, while 27% believe it's spent not enough, the right amount, where 11% say it's not enough, 14% don't know. And among Republicans, those numbers are significantly higher. The U.S. public doesn't seem enthusiastic about it. When Antony Blinken spoke about China, he emphasized that the United States is increasing its cooperation with the Philippines and other countries in the Pacific region. The USA is beefing up its forces in the Pacific, perceiving China as a threat.
We will continue to engage with China from a position of strength. Our partnerships in the Indo-Pacific have never been stronger. The United States is more closely aligned than ever, with the G7, with the EU, with other allies and partners on the challenges presented by Beijing. And we're working together to address them. We're deepening cooperation and coordination between NATO and our Indo-Pacific allies.
Certainly interesting words. They do not make a strong case that China is a threat. They just present China as being a threat and are demanding international cooperation in their efforts against China. It's going to be rallying different countries throughout the region against China. Quite interesting words for the closing of the year that we heard from the U.S. State Department, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken.
So that was my report, but the part that I wanted you all to see and the part that I think is worth discussing is this part.
To believe that militarily, economically down.
Now, it's
that we can draw from.
Important to note some of what was said.
This is the part I want you to pay attention to, the part where Antony Blinken says.
A pot of money that we can draw from. The assistance, the support that we have designated for Ukraine, that is running out. It's running down. We are nearly out of money that we need, and we're nearly out of time. I can't put a precise date on it, but that's the direction that this is moving in. And we have a very clear plan, as I said, to make sure that Ukraine can stand on its own 2 feet, militarily, economically, democratically, so that these levels of support and assistance will no longer be necessary.
So there you go. There is no magical pot of money, they said. And they're coming to an end of what they can do for Ukraine. Now, that's big. That's very, very big. That is a huge change in tone from what the White House has been saying, from what the U.S. State Department under the direction of Antony Blinken, from what the White House has been saying. That is a huge change in tone. Suddenly, they don't have the money for Ukraine. You know, you'll notice Zelensky is not getting to speak to Congress when he's coming. It's looking to me like there may be a game changer in the works. It may be time for a peace treaty to be signed because everybody knows, and, the work of Seymour Hersh and others has revealed, everybody knows at this point that there is no question. There is absolutely no question. Russia is going to stay in Donbass. The Donbass regions, Donetsk, Lugansk, they have voted to join with Russia, and they ain't leaving. Crimea is Russia, and it's going to be Russia, and it's always been Russia. The only reason Crimea wasn't considered part of Russia is because Khrushchev gave it to Ukraine as a friendly gesture when he came to power after the death of Stalin, and they were all the Soviet Union back then, so it didn't matter. But, you look at the Crimean War historically, it involved Russia. Crimea had a huge military base there before the fall of the Soviet Union. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the treaty said that Russia got to keep their huge military base there. Then when the USA overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014 and the people in Crimea were thinking they might lose their jobs because that Russian military base might go away, they all voted overwhelmingly in a referendum to join with Russia. Crimea is staying part of Russia. Donbass, at this point, Ukraine has bombed them for 8 years straight. All these children have been killed. Russia has absorbed 2 to 3 million refugees. They're not leaving Russia. They're staying with Russia. The Russian military is there. The war is pretty much over. Russia won. But Ukraine is determined to keep throwing people's lives away. Zelensky and his cronies are making a killing off of pilfering the funds. And that's what Seymour Hersh and others have revealed. The money that they are siphoning off of this aid, of our tax money that's piling into Ukraine, the Ukrainian oligarchs, the Zelensky inner circle, the military families, the top, they are siphoning up so much goddamn money. They don't want it to stop. They are so excited for all the money that they can siphon off, and they are corrupt. And Ukraine's running out of people. I don't know if you've seen the video of at this point, that they're grabbing people off the street. Have you seen this? They're grabbing old men off the street, basically, and forcing them to fight. They're running out of people, and they're grabbing people off the street in order to make them fight in Ukraine. I will show you some of that video. Right, mainstream media, of course, isn't showing you this, but the Ukrainians are so desperate to have anyone fight for them at this point that they're randomly grabbing people off the street in order to forcibly conscript them into the military. Right now, they're not showing you this in mainstream media, but I'll show you a clip of that. I mean, we've got video. They have, they're so desperate to keep this war going. They got people patrolling the streets for anyone who looks like they're of military age. And if they are, then they drag them away in a van and force them into the military. Let me show you. We've got a clip, and there's many clips like this that are coming out. I mean, it's really something special that's happening. And of course, you're never going to hear about that in U.S. mainstream media. But Ukraine at this point, they've run out of people. There are so many people, that don't want to fight and have left Ukraine because they just don't want to fight. In addition to that, there's many people in Ukraine that don't want to have their lives thrown away to try and re-seize regions that are never going back to Ukraine because Ukraine doesn't want the people there, and they've made that overwhelmingly clear. And so they're desperately dragging people into the military at this point to try and keep this war going. I'll show you. This is a video that's been going around. This is the Ukrainian military grabbing a draftee. Let me pull up the video here. Yeah. Just waiting for the video to come up. Don't you love YouTube? Alrighty, just waiting for the video to come through. Yeah, no, it's interesting. The term press ganging. I don't know if you know about this, but the term press ganging. Has anyone ever heard this? So apparently, back in the day, the British Navy used to recruit people by tricking them. They would shake their hands, and they would have the emblem, the symbol, the emblem of the British Empire on their hand. And so they'd shake their hand, and then you pressed your hand onto the symbol of the British Empire, and then you were a volunteer, you were recruited to the Navy, and that's how they would forcibly conscript people. The term is press ganging. And it's a slang term. It's mainly used in Britain, but it's, I guess people are using it. Is the taking men into the military or navy by compulsion, impressment or colloquy, the press or press ganging. It's a term for what the British military used to do. There's a Wikipedia page for the term. So there you go. It's not a term we use in the United States. We just talk about getting drafted. I think the legal name for it is conscription. They call it conscription when you're forced to go into the military, which is interesting. So, when I turned 18, just like every other young male in the United States, I had to register for the draft. That was just something I had to do. So interesting story behind all of that. So, coming out of World War II, the USA had a military draft, right? Coming out of World War II, it was just normal. They had a military draft. And when the Korean War happened, all the young men got drafted. And the way it worked was that you were a young man and you had to have a draft card on you at all times. And coming out of World War II, you had to have a draft card on you. If you went to college, though, they would give you what they called a college deferment. If you had a wife and kids, they would let you stay home. If you were married, if you had a wife and kids, but if you were a single young man, you just went into the military. And that's how it was. During the Korean War, you went into the military. In the 1950s, after the Korean War, you went into the military. It was assumed it was just this regular draft. Elvis Presley went into the military, and there was no war going on at the time. Elvis Presley, it was the early 60s. I think the Vietnam War hadn't even really gotten going yet, but Elvis Presley, he was this famous young man, and he was young and he was male, and so he got a draft notice and he was taken to the U.S. military. And it was just a thing. It was an aspect of U.S. society, as every young man who was not married, who wasn't in college, you got drafted into the military. Then the Vietnam War got going. And as you can imagine, the Vietnam War was rather unpopular, and that, and so it started out that everyone who didn't have a college deferment, everyone who didn't have a wife and kids got drafted. And then they started to realize that was kind of unfair. So they started making it based on people's birthdays. They started drafting people based on their birthday. They would have drawings on television. They draw the names out. And then when the Vietnam War ended, they ultimately got rid of it. They ended the draft. And there was no draft. I think it was Richard Nixon withdrew U.S. forces from Vietnam, and he ended military conscription. But then it was Jimmy Carter who restarted military conscription. And he restarted it, I believe, in 1980. He set up the draft boards. So all over the United States, there are draft boards. There are military people in the United States. And every young male in the United States, when they turn 18, has to register for the draft. Tyler is a high school teacher. He probably, there's one day a year where all, in school, we all had to just fill out a form, and it was that easy. And it's really, there's not much to it. You just, you write your name, you write your birthday, and that's it. There's really not much more to it. You just fill out a form. You can do it on the internet, and, it's required though. If you don't do it, you can't go to college. You can't apply for student loans. You can't, if you don't do it, you can't do anything. They've got all these things you can't do if you don't do it. But they restarted draft registration. And this is interesting. This is one of the things that Jimmy Carter did. He restarted draft registration. He restarted it in, I believe, 1980. Was it 1980 or 1979? I think it was 1980. And the reason given, yes, 1980, Jimmy Carter restarted selective service registration. And there was a huge amount of outcry about it. There was protests all over the country. And I know people that were 18 at the time that made a big point of refusing to do it and getting arrested. And it was a big deal. January 23rd, 1980, Jimmy Carter restarted draft registration in the United States. And the reason for it that he gave was the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan. That was the reason. The Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. Well, we know what really happened was in 1978, Afghanistan had the Sour Revolution, and the monarchy was toppled, and the People's Democratic Party took power. Then the United States started funding Osama bin Laden and all these Wahhabi religious fanatics to try and overthrow the Afghan government. And so the Afghan government requested the Soviet Union to send its military in to back them up. And so they did. And then the USA started screaming the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. And so that was the excuse that Jimmy Carter used, not only to boycott the Olympics. I believe the 1980 Olympics were in Moscow, and Jimmy Carter boycotted the Olympics, which was a huge blow to many athletes, right? I mean, you get once in your life, if you're an Olympic runner, right? The Olympics are every 4 years, right? If you're an Olympic marathon runner, your only chance of going to the Olympics and winning a gold medal is when you're 22 or 23. I mean, you get one chance. And for Jimmy Carter to boycott the Olympics and say no U.S. participation, that was like a huge, many athletes had their lives destroyed by that, right? They'd been training their whole life. They were in their prime of their youth. And then Jimmy Carter said, no, we don't approve of Soviet activities in Afghanistan. They boycotted the Olympics. Utterly disgusting, despicable. And because the Olympics were in Moscow and because the Soviet Union, they were the baddies, and they had quote unquote invaded Afghanistan, which is with Afghanistan's permission. They sent military support. Because of that, the USA boycotted the Olympics in 1980, and we also know that they reinstated draft registration. What's interesting is that Jimmy Carter, his presidency was a weird presidency because in a lot of ways it was kind of like Truth and Reconciliation for the 1960s. Jimmy Carter, he also pardoned draft dodgers, right? If you went to Canada to avoid the draft, if you had refused to fight in Vietnam, if you had lied to get out of military service, he pardoned all the draft dodgers. And that was a really big deal. And a lot of people who were in Canada were able to come back to the United States. Many people fled to Canada to avoid the Vietnam War. They were able to come back to the United States because of Jimmy Carter, etc. But he did not pardon draft resistors. There were a number of people in American prisons who said, I refuse to fight, because the Vietnamese are right and American imperialism is wrong. And they refused to fight. Now, there were some people who were what they called conscientious objectors. And that is a special law that we have in the United States, that if you are from a pacifist religion, they will let you out of military service. But you have to do something else. You have to work in a military factory. You can be a medical volunteer. You have to do something else for the amount of time you would be in the military. And you have to object to all war. You can't object to just the war you're fighting in. So you have to be opposed to any violence. So if you're saying, I support the Vietnamese people, you can't do that, right? You can't do that because, you're supporting an armed conflict. The conscientious objector thing, you have to be a pacifist. You have to be a 100% religious pacifist who would never participate in any violence. And so like if you're a Quaker, if you're a Mennonite, if you're Amish, you go before the draft board and you have to prove that you're actually Amish. You have to prove that you're actually a Quaker. You can't just have made it up, and they interrogate you about your religion, is my understanding. They will bring out the Bible and say, well, what about this and what about that? And you have to prove that you actually have these religious beliefs. They'll let you out of military service. And usually you have to do something else. Many conscientious objectors work in hospitals. Many of them will, they'll arrange for them to go into a special part of the military where they don't engage in combat. There's many different loopholes, but that's one like loophole in U.S. law. And it's one of the weird loopholes that we have in American law. Right. Most countries in the world, like homeschooling, for example, that would be illegal in most countries in the world. Most countries in the world that have compulsory education, you got to send your kids to school. Could be a private school, could be a public school. You got to send your kids to school. But in the USA, we have this special exemption that, you can homeschool your kids and give them, control their education through homeschooling. And that, I believe homeschooling is a new development. When was homeschooling legalized in the United States? I think it was legalized in the United States. I believe, when was homeschooling legalized? I believe it was, I see where it's homeschooling in the United States is lawful in all 50 states as of 2012. It started underground in rural areas in the 1970s. Several books called Attention to Homeschooling. Yeah, I mean, the laws started changing, you know, and the homeschooling movement really got going in like the 80s, the 1980s and 90s among religious people. They don't send their kids to school, and we allow that. You know, Lee Stranahan says he homeschooled his kids. And, you know, not everyone who homeschools is a religious, you know, fanatic, right? That is, the homeschooling movement was largely pushed by the religious right, evangelical Christians who felt like schools in America, public schools, had too much sex and too much Darwinian evolution and such. But actually, you know, homeschooling in the United States, you know, there's people who do it for all kinds of different reasons. You know, they feel that the schools are too restrictive. They feel like their kids won't get enough good education in the schools. You know, they talk about U.S. schools and how they have you know, a kind of an authoritarian, brutalizing environment. And, you know, I don't know. There's all kinds of different reasons people homeschool. But the homeschooling movement, that's a special thing, and it's a special thing we've made up in the USA that you can do, which most countries wouldn't allow. The same with the conscientious objection thing. Like you know, you can not serve in the military if your religion objects to it. We have a lot of laws like that. You know, the United States is and I think this is fascinating, right? Let me just reflect on this for a moment, right? I am a very strong believer in the separation of church and state, right? I very strongly believe in that. And if you object to that, I'm just going to tell you, you don't understand America, right? I'd hate to be snide, but, you know, it's one thing to say that you are a very religious person, you feel that religion is everywhere, and it is. But I'm telling you that you could never have a state religion in America because people in America take religion way too damn seriously. You know what I'm saying? Right? In Britain, they have a state religion. And I've talked to my friends from Britain. Nobody cares, right? In Britain, the Church of England is the state religion, and nobody cares, right? Nobody cares. Right? They might, you know, like at the graduation ceremony, they might have a priest get up and read a poem or something. You know, the anthem says "God Save the Queen." You know, the government wings, the wings of the government are technically called ministries. But other than that, nobody cares because people in the UK are not that religious, right? And, you know, Muslims might be very religious. There might be evangelical Protestants, but for the most part, the bulk of the population in the United Kingdom, whatever their upbringing is, Catholic, Protestant, you know, Muslim, whatever, they don't care. And because they don't care, they can have the state religion be the Church of England and nobody cares. In America, right? And this is what people don't get. They think separation of church and state means atheism. No. If we were an atheist country and we had a state religion, most people wouldn't care, right? If most people in the country were atheists, you know, having a state religion probably wouldn't bother them that much. The reason we could never have a state religion in the United States is because people don't seem to realize that a state religion is not just the government professing belief in God. No. And we already do that, right? On our money, it says "In God We Trust." The U.S. Pledge of Allegiance says "Under God." You know, we kind of do that already, right? You know, the founding documents of the country, you know, endowed by their creator. You know, that's not what that means. Now, there are many atheists who feel that that's offensive and that violates the Constitution, but that's not what a state religion is, right? A state religion is when the government picks one particular faith and says that is the faith of our government, which many countries around the world do, right? Most of Latin America, the government is officially Roman Catholic. In most of Latin America, the government is Roman Catholic. If there was to be a declaration that the American government were Roman Catholic, there would be riots in the streets. Many Protestants would object strongly. Many evangelicals feel that the Roman Catholic Church that, you know, supports Darwinian evolution, that, you know, I mean, they would be absolutely furious about that. Oh, but what if we made, you know, Protestantism the official religion of the United States, right? What if we did that? Well, what kind of Protestant? You can't just declare Protestantism the state religion. It doesn't work like that. There's about 1 million different kinds of Protestant. And if you declared that, you know, Congregationalism was the state religion, many fundamental Baptists would be furious about that. If you declared, and having the American government declare a state religion would not be possible because people here take religion way too damn seriously. Americans are way too religious to ever accept the government declaring one religion to be the official religion. And that's why the First Amendment of the Constitution, the very, very first, Baptists will do the opposite of whatever you tell us to do. Exactly. That's why, the First Amendment, the very First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, when people say First Amendment, they think of free speech. That's part of it. They think of freedom of the press. That's part of it. That's not the First Amendment. I will pull up on the screen the very First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. I will show you exactly what it says, because it's important. This is important stuff, right? This is what the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says, verbatim, right? This is the First Amendment. The colonists were not willing to ratify the U.S. Constitution, right? They weren't willing to accept it, and so they made changes to the Constitution so that the American people would ratify it, so the states would accept the Constitution, right? And the first change, the very first change that they made, before freedom of speech, before freedom of the press, this is what they said. And it's not even about freedom of religion, right? It's not even freedom of religion. I will read you. I will put it on the screen so you can see this. This is such a very important part of the history of our country that people don't understand, right? The very first amendment of the U.S. Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning that there will never be a state religion in America. The government will never pick any religion and say, this is the right religion, this is the religion that we want for the country, ever, right? And then after that, it says, or prohibiting free exercise thereof, right? So that gives you the right to practice whatever religion you want, or abridging freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition their government for the redress of grievances. So the very first line was, there will never be an established religion in the United States. The U.S. Congress will never pick one religion. Why? Why was this? Because at the time that the United States was being created, we know there were 13 colonies. There were 13 states in the original United States. 9 of those 13 colonies had an official religion. 9 of them. Massachusetts was Puritan. Maryland. What religion do you think Maryland was? It was Mary's land. It was Catholic. Virginia. What religion do you think Virginia was? Well, it's for the Virgin Mary. It was Catholic, right? Rhode Island was established by people who did not get along with the Puritans in Massachusetts and started their own religion. New Hampshire was started by people who did not get along with the Puritans in Massachusetts. They started their own state. 9 out of the 13 colonies had their own official religion. And many of the states were very afraid that if they merged into one country, the government, the central government that was being formed, would pick one religion over the others. And so, to make sure that that never happened, the very First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution said, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And that was even more important than freedom of religion. Freedom of religion comes afterwards, or prohibiting free exercise thereof, right? So before they're even worried about outlawing some religions, they make clear we don't want any religion to get picked by the American government. The American government can never say what the right religion is and what the wrong religion is. We can never have an established religion in the United States. And then they say, and you can't stop anyone from practicing their religion, and you can't abridge freedom of speech, right? You can't stop people from saying what they think, and you can't restrict the press, or you can't restrict the right of people to protest, or the right of people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for the redress of grievances. Now, that last one there, right? That last one, the right of people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. That last one is very interesting, because we all know you have to have a permit to protest in many parts of the country. And that if you don't have a permit, right, you can't assemble. You can't have a crowd of people gather if you don't have a permit. There's all kinds of stipulations on that last one, right? The right to peaceably assemble. they used to talk about, there used to be something called the heckler's veto, right? That if you had a peaceful gathering and somebody in the audience shouted violent, something calling for violence, that was called the heckler's veto. And then the police could shut the rally down because somebody in the audience shouted a call for violence. And that was a very famous, there's been Supreme Court rulings about that, right? I think there was a case of a guy by the name of Irving Feiner, if I remember correctly. And there was a Supreme Court case, Irving Feiner, right? Yeah, this guy, Irving Feiner was his name. And he was giving a speech. He was a young communist, and he was giving a speech, and he called for the black people of America black and white people to rise up arm in arm, right? To rise up arm in arm and organize for their rights in his speech. And he said that in his speech, I believe it was like 1950, right? Something like that. Let me pull up the Supreme Court ruling. Irving Feiner, Supreme Court, right? It was a very famous case. Irving Feiner. What was it? Irving Feiner. Feiner versus New York, 1951. So Feiner, this guy, Irving Feiner, I'll put a picture of him on the screen, right? He was speaking, and he was a Communist Party member, and it was 1951, in the middle of McCarthyism. And he was speaking somewhere in New York. I don't even know where it was, and he was speaking, and he called for black and white people to rise up arm in arm. And then somebody in the audience shouted something to the effect of, if that son of a bitch doesn't show up, I'm going to beat him up, or something like that. Right. Right. And somebody in the audience shouted that someone threatened assault against the speaker. And so the police forcibly broke up the march and arrested the guy. Now, in the initial police report, they said that Irving Feiner, that he had called for black and white people to rise up with arms, with guns. And he clarified, and I believe he was able to prove, no, I called for them to rise up arm in arm, like coming together, not with arms. And the fact that some guy in the audience shouted, threatened to assault him, said, if that son of the bitch doesn't shut up, I'm going to punch him, or something like that. That did not give the police the right to forcibly break up the protest. Now, I believe he lost this case, but it's a very famous Supreme Court case, Feiner versus New York. It was about, they said if your assembly is not peaceful, right, you suddenly don't have the right to engage in it, right? That was what the government said, right? The Constitution says you have the right to peaceably assemble, but if your assembly is no longer peaceable, right? If your assembly is violent, then the government has the right to break it up. It's a riot at that point. Very interesting. Very interesting. So what does it mean to peaceably assemble? When does an assembly become violent? Does it become violent if someone shouts assault? Does it become violent if you say rise up in arms? Does the rhetoric that you use make it an illegal assembly? What makes an assembly illegal? It's a good question. It's a very, very good question. What makes an assembly illegal? But anyway, I'm on kind of a tangent. But my point was that the conscientious objector thing, the CO thing that we have in the United States, most countries in the world wouldn't have that. Most countries in the world, if they're going to war and you are a young man, you're going to war yourself, unless some places they might have a stipulation for if you're a father or something like that. But if you say, well, my religion doesn't agree with that, they're gonna be like, heck, no, who gives a fuck? Get in the military, right? Well, and that's what it is in Ukraine. But here in the United States, we do have special stipulations, and that's one of the weird things about American society, is because so many people have come here, and this country was basically established by various people who had fled here in order to practice religious freedom, right? The English Civil War. You had the bourgeoisie that was trying to overthrow feudalism. Feudalism was associated with the Catholic Church. The Anglican Church, the Church of England, was seen as being pretty much a copy of the Catholic Church. So in order to overthrow feudalism, you had the bourgeoisie that was arising, fomenting religious fanaticism, right? And you had many different religious groups that emerged in the English Civil War as the bourgeoisie was trying to motivate people to rise up against the feudal aristocracy. The king was aligned with the feudal aristocracy, but the parliament took up arms against the king, and that's the English Civil War. And King Charles I lost the war, and they cut his head off. And Oliver Cromwell became the Lord and Protector. And during the English Civil War, there were many, many different fanatical religious groups among the urban working class that were fomented in order to empower the bourgeoisie to rally the people to fight against feudalism. And many of those religious groups, are still around. The Quakers, right? William Penn and what's his name? I don't even remember the other guy, the guy who started Quakerism. What was his name? I can't even remember his name. But William Penn and oh my goodness, who was it? There's many of them, right? The Ranters. They were a religious group that believed in sexual freedom. They were around. There was the Levelers. They were a group that advocated the right of all people to vote. They were a religious group that advocated the right of people to vote. There was so many of these fanatical religious groups that were fomented by the bourgeoisie in order to bring about the level of popular support for overturning feudalism. And the Covenanters, there was many of these groups that existed, then we know what happened, which is the bourgeoisie fears their own revolution. There's many examples of this, right? The French Revolution, you eventually have Napoleon coming in and becoming the military dictator and trying to hold back his own revolution. And in England, they eventually, after Oliver Cromwell died, they brought the king back, and they brought King Charles II back, and they brought the aristocracy back because the revolutionary energy created to overturn feudalism was continuing, right? And people were demanding not just an end to feudalism, but the rights of all. Right. And we saw that happening in France as well. The French Revolution was continuing, and that, the bourgeoisie had fomented all this radicalism to defeat feudalism. But then, they saw that the radicalism they had fomented became a threat to even their own power. So you see them retreating from their own revolution. And as the bourgeoisie was retreating from its own revolution, many of what they called the religious dissenters fled to the United States. And the USA was largely settled by people who were radicalized by the overthrow of feudalism and by the English Civil War to become religious dissenters of one form or another: Puritans, separatists, ranters, Quakers, levelers, etc. And when England started rolling back the radicalism of the English Civil War, they got on a boat and they came over here. And a lot of them came over to the United States because they wanted to build an egalitarian society. And, we forget about this, but there were many communist communities formed in the early United States, utopian socialist communities. And again, this is something that the ruling class of the United States hides from us. Zor, right? That was Akron, Ohio. I grew up near Akron, Ohio. And Akron, Ohio was originally settled by a group called the Zorites. And they set up a socialist commune in Akron, Ohio called Zor, right? And Zor, it was a socialist community. It was a collectively owned, everyone's equal religious community. That was started, and I believe Zor started in 1817, I believe. So it was pretty late in the game. The United States had already been going at that time. But all over the founding of the United States, you had many communistic communities that were formed in America, utopian socialist communes, right? In fact, Wikipedia has a list of utopian communities established in America. And many of the people who came over to the United States said, we are going to try and build a society without any inequality. We are going to build a utopian society in America. And, the Rappites, the Owenites, and New Harmony. I mean, you look at this list. It's a really long list. Many communist communities were established in America because these were the dissenters who thought that the English Civil War had not gone far enough. They wanted to keep the fanaticism of the English Civil War going, and so they started these utopian communities. Now, Why are none of them around? Well, that's because communism doesn't work, Caleb. Communism is just like a stupid thing. Duh. I learned that in school at 5th grade. Human nature. Oh my God. Oh my God. Communism just doesn't work. Haven't you read it? Haven't you learned 3rd grade? Everyone knows communism doesn't work. No one wants to share anything. People like to work hard and keep their money, Caleb. Oh my God. Well, actually, no. That is not what was really going on. We have a very, very good book written by Frederick Engels called Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, right? Right? We have our own CPI edition of it. Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific was written by Frederick Engels to explain why the early utopian socialist communities were not successful. Why were they unable to, build a model socialist society? And many of these utopians were under the impression that they would come to the United States and they would set up like one little socialist city, and they would share and hold all things in common, and everyone would see how awesome it was. And then there would be more, and eventually socialism would just come into being because we build a bunch of model communities. That was the basis of what they call utopian socialism. And Frederick Engels, Marx's close collaborator, was forced to write a book called Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, explaining why that was not possible. And this is probably one of the most important books in the history of the Marxist tradition, is Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific by Frederick Engels. It is a vitally important text because it explains the difference between utopian socialism and scientific socialism. These are two different things, and that socialism cannot be created by the ideas in people's heads. It must arise from the existing social conditions. And that the various utopian communities, that's our edition of the book, the various utopian communities that were established, they still existed in a sea of capitalism, and they were trying to create equality by willing it, by just saying we are going to be the most good and the most moral, and we are going to create a moralistic society. We are going to build a good society by willing it, by just being good. We're going to do it. Well, that's not the basis of it. That history is speeding forward like a train, and different social forces are clashing with each other for power, and that feudalism was holding back historical progress and economic development. So it was then replaced by capitalism. Feudalism had, prior to that, been holding back historical progress, and feudalism was an advance over what came before it, which was called slavery. Slavery was an advance over hunter-gatherer civilization, and that humanity was constantly moving toward a higher plane of existence as different classes and different social forces clashed with one another as we moved toward a higher plane. And that socialism, the modern socialist movement, was going to come about as a result of the struggle between the capitalist and the worker, and that the socialist utopian communities that were created, they were a reaction to the disappointment that people throughout Europe felt with the bourgeois revolutions. The fact that the French Revolution did not really create a society of liberty, equality, fraternity. That America did not really become a society with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That the revolutions that brought down feudalism promised a brave new world where people would all be equal and the rights of man would be respected. But what they really just paved the way for was the rule of society by those who had the wealth. In feudalism, society had been ruled by all kinds of mystical ritual. Feudalism was a society where people were born into their position, where the language changed based on your social hierarchy. You had thee and thou versus you and me, and there was all kinds of different rituals in which some people were born into this position and some people were born into this position, and there was no social mobility to speak of, and that's the way society was. And it was all dressed up in mystical religious language. Well, capitalism came along, and as Marx talks about, capitalism stripped society of all the heavenly rituals and all of the halos, and he made a society with no remaining nexus but callous cash payment, where the only thing that was really sacred was money. And he stripped feudalism, stripped away all the mystical chivalry and all the codes of law and all the rules of feudalism, and replaced them with a world where might is right, where those who have the gold make the rules. That's capitalism. And capitalism created a highly unequal world, but the inequality was very blatant and obvious. Some people have all the power because they've got all the money, and some people don't because they don't have the money. And it divided society up into two greatly hostile camps: the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, those who own for a living, who own the banks and own the factories and own the major centers of economic power, and the rest of us who sell our labor power, wage workers, right? The proletariat, those with nothing to lose but their chains and the whole wide world to win, those who must sell themselves subjected to the vicissitudes of the market like any other commodity. Our labor power we sell to our boss gives us a wage in exchange, right? That is the life of the proletariat. And that the proletariat has an increasingly unstable life. The capitalist is constantly replacing workers with machines, and it's only a matter of time before the proletarians band together and rise up and seize control of the means of production. The banks and the factories and the centers of economic power become public property, the property of all of society, no longer the property of a wealthy few. And that's the beginning of socialism. And socialism lays the basis for that ultimate higher stage of communism, a society where there's so much wealth and there's so much abundance that nobody really has any more than everybody else because everyone's got more than enough. And people can just do what they feel like doing, and the rules and restrictions and authority can just kind of fade away. The ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world of vast abundance. That is the communist message, right? And it came out of the disappointment with the bourgeois revolutions. And this is important for us to understand here in America. It's very important for us to understand here in America because our country was founded by people who were like Karl Marx. They were disappointed. They were disappointed with the English Civil War. They were disappointed with the outcome of the capitalist revolutions. They said that the revolutions that brought down the kings and cut kings' heads off in France and in Britain and elsewhere didn't go far enough. However, there is a key difference, and this is very important, between Karl Marx and the French revolutionary tradition, which Karl Marx was much closer to. He lived in Paris. He was from Germany, but he lived in Paris, and he was much closer to the French revolutionary tradition than the English revolutionary tradition. But America was not founded by French radicals. It was founded by English radicals. And there is a key difference, which is that in France, the revolution to bring down feudalism was an atheist revolution. It was a revolution that sought to abolish God. It was a revolution that saw the Catholic Church, the institution that propped up the autocratic monarchy. It saw the Catholic Church as its enemy. And after the French Revolution, the French converted all the major churches into temples of reason, and they tried to abolish religion. Now, eventually, they had to back down from that. Napoleon, when he came into power, he brought the Catholic Church back. But the French Revolution was largely a revolution that was anti-religious in its nature. The English Revolution, the English Civil War, was very different. The English Civil War was a revolution in which the bourgeois revolutionary forces that eventually cut off the head of King Charles I, that they were religious fanatics, that they were motivated not by rebellion against religion, but rather by a feeling that they could have a spiritual connection with God all on their own, and that the stale institutions of the Church of England and the Catholic Church were usurping a direct connection with spirituality and with spiritual power. the tone of Oliver Cromwell, the tone of the Roundheads, who toppled King Charles I, and the tone of the French revolutionaries of the 1790s is completely different. One of them is trying to make religion real, and the other is fighting against religion. This is very interesting. The revolutionaries of the English Civil War believed very fervently in the existence of God. They could feel God. You know, the Quakers talked about the light within, the inner light. They could feel God's existence. They felt a direct connection to spirituality, and that led them to say that the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church was a stale, phony, authoritarian institution that was suppressing the natural spiritual power that they felt within their souls. Whereas the French Revolution was saying that there is no God, and God is something invented to suppress my sexual desire. And we know that the French Revolution was largely an explosion of rage and vengeance, right? They cut off the heads of all the aristocrats. And it was also an explosion of sexual freedom, right? There was a huge effort to allow people to be crazy sexually during the French Revolution. And that these are two distinct, and we know the Puritans were the opposite of the French revolutionaries. They were not becoming rebels against the Church of England or rebels against the Catholic Church because they wanted to unleash their sexual desires. It was quite contrary. They were stricter, right? They saw the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, as a bunch of phonies who made up loopholes. They wanted stricter rules than ever. They wanted to outlaw eating Christmas dinner. They wanted to, outlaw smiling on a Sunday. They were trying to be stricter. They thought that the Catholic Church had gotten away from the principles of the Bible. So these are two faces of the bourgeois revolution. And this is interesting, right? Because it's the same class, those who own the money, overthrowing the same class, which is those who claim lineage based on their historic title, their hereditary title. This is the same class fighting the same class, but under different circumstances. It manifests itself differently. And this is extremely important. Oliver Cromwell was a capitalist fighting feudalism. Robespierre and Danton and Jean-Paul Marat were capitalists fighting against feudalism. But the way that their rebellion expressed itself was different under different circumstances. And this is important for us to understand because people expect communism to look the same way everywhere. Now that we are the proletariat struggling against capitalism, struggling against imperialism, we expect everywhere that we are going, as our working class, to fight against their imperialist class, that it's going to look the same. And it ain't. And that is a hill I am willing to die on. The very first book that the Center for Political Innovation published, I'm going to go get it because something weird happened, and I'm going to tell you all about it. The very first book that the Center for Political Innovation ever published, for very good reason, was the Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi. Right? And I'm thinking about this book a lot because 30 of them sold yesterday. 30 copies of this book sold yesterday, which is not normal, right? I mean, there's been well over 2,000 copies of this book that have sold since we published it. 2 or 3 of them sell every day. But yesterday was a very unique day because there were 30 of them that sold in one day. And that is not normal. So far today, there have been 23 of them that have sold so far. And now I found out why that is. And that's that Midwest Marx made a video where they read from it. And that video went viral. They made a video about Libya and about Gaddafi. And they read from the book, and that video on TikTok has, 7 million views. So that's why we're selling this book like crazy. So, hey, thank you, Midwest Marx. We appreciate it, hey, whatever disagreements there might be, we appreciate that. And, we want to be your friend, Midwest Marx. If you want to have us on your show, have us on anytime. But, they did a video and they showed this and it went around. But the reason that this was the first book that the Center for Political Innovation ever published is because if we want to talk about our ideological heritage, we want to talk about where CPI came from, this book is really gosh darn important. This is the book that was written by Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, when Libya was a socialist country. And if you read this book, there is no question that Libya was indeed a socialist country. From 1969, when they had their revolution, until 2011, when Barack Obama overthrew them. Well, when this guy was running Libya, Libya was a socialist country. And the communist world considered it to be such, right? It tried to join the Warsaw Pact, even. The Soviet Union referred to it as a socialist-oriented government, an SOG. The Soviet Union thought they were a socialist country. They had a centrally planned economy where the banks and the factories and the industries were in the hands of the people. They had these things called popular committees or popular assemblies that were like Soviets. And it was very clearly a socialist society. However, if you read this book, Gaddafi makes clear that he rejects Marxism. He rejects Marxism because he says that Marxism says that socialism will come into existence on the basis of the industrial working class, the wage worker, struggling against his employer. And that is not what happened in Libya. Libya was a largely Bedouin society at the time of its revolution. And it started with the oil workers, who were proletarians who went on strike. And then it started with the Bedouin who joined the uprising. And then Gaddafi led the military to seize the government buildings. And that Libya became a socialist country in the process of struggling against imperialism. But it was not a workers versus bosses kind of struggle. And that he considers Libya to be a socialist country, but he does not believe it is socialist on the basis of workers, factory owners, struggling against factory bosses. Right? It was socialist in that it kicked the imperialists out and it reorganized the economy, in particularly the oil sector. It reorganized the economy, the oil sector, to be publicly owned and operated, to rebuild a collective economy, state-run industries, etc. And Gaddafi said he's not a Marxist. And Gaddafi, he was a Muslim. He did believe in Islam. And though he created a secular society that had far more religious freedom than you have throughout the region, until the day he died, he was a believing Muslim. He began his speeches, I believe, with "In the name of God, the beneficent, the most merciful." He was a Muslim. And if you read this book, it's very clear that Libya was a socialist society. But many Marxists say it wasn't. Now, the Soviet Union thought it was a socialist society. But many Marxists insist that because Gaddafi was not a Marxist-Leninist, because he rejected Marxism, that Libya was simply a bourgeois nationalist society. Well, it wasn't. The broad masses of the people of Libya, including the working class, came together and they formed an anti-imperialist united front, and they kicked out the imperialists. They created a new state with people's assemblies and popular committees, and that new state controlled the means of production and organized the means of production so they could grow and flourish, and the springs of collective wealth flew abundantly. Libya was very much a socialist society. But the ideology that it espoused was Islamic socialism and Kibism, which is what is expressed here in the Green Book, not Marxism-Leninism. And understanding that was a key ideological point of development for me. Because the communist groups that I was in and around all insisted that Libya was not a socialist society. And it was. And that is what led me to realize that classic ML, dogmatic ML, is never going to return. There's socialism all over the world today. China is a vibrant socialist society. Vietnam is a vibrant socialist society. Nicaragua is a socialist society. Cuba is a socialist society. Venezuela is a socialist society. There is socialism everywhere. But it's not Cold War Soviet-style communism. It's just not. And so those of us who believe in socialism, we can do one of two things. We can live in the past and reject it. Or we can recognize that just as the bourgeois revolutions were different in different places, and the French revolutionaries were fanatical atheists, and the English revolutionaries were fanatical Christians, the working class anti-imperialist revolution, you're on the list, is going to be different in different places. Socialism exists in this world, but it is going to look different. And when Hugo Chavez spoke of socialism for the 21st century, and when they speak of socialism with Chinese characteristics in China, when they speak of Ba'athist Arab socialism in Syria and Iraq, when they speak of not capitalism but Islam in Iran, when the Houthis talk about their anti-capitalist revolution, and they oppose capitalism, and they call for a government that focuses on economic development, right? When you listen to the Houthi rhetoric, the Houthis are anti-imperialists, they're religious fanatics, but they don't call themselves communists. They're definitely not Marxists. They are Zaydi Shia Muslims. They want a government of the oppressed, a government that focuses on economic development. There is a global revolutionary anti-imperialist movement today that is striving to defeat the imperialists, to destroy the big banks and corporations that dominate the world and reorganize the global economy to serve the people and to end the restrictions on human creativity and growth imposed by the irrational profit motive, and replace that with an economy that is organized to serve public good so that growth can continue. There is a huge, vast socialist movement in the world today. But that socialist movement is not classical Marxism-Leninism. They're not trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. They're not trying to create a society on the model that socialism was in the 20th century. We must study Marxism-Leninism. We must know Marxism-Leninism. We must know it. We must know it backwards and forwards. We got to know and study imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. We got to know and study The State and Revolution by Lenin. We got to know and study left-wing communism and infantile disorder. What is to be done? We got to know all of that. And we've got to know and study Stalin and his writings and his achievements, the problems of socialism in the USSR. The fight against the opposition and Trotskyism. We got to study Mao Zedong and the Little Red Book. We got to know that stuff. We got to know Deng Xiaoping theory. We've got to know the writings of Castro and Kim Il-sung. We got to know all of this. But we have to understand that that was one stage. That was one stage. And that when it happens here, it's not going to look like that. It's going to look the same in one way, in that the means of production will be operated to serve public good and not the profits of wealthy few. It'll be the same in one way, that it'll be the imperialists who will be defeated, but it's going to sound different and it's going to look different because the Chinese Revolution led by Mao sounded very different than what Marx and Lenin did. Go and read the Little Red Book for yourself. Read anyone who was there. They said it looked and sounded very different. The peasants were the main fighting force in the revolution. There are many differences. And when it happened in Cuba, it sounded very different than it happened in China. When it happened in Korea, it sounded very different. And when it happens here, it's going to sound very different. And it is 1,000 times more important for us to understand the strengths of these revolutions. But we have to do it with the understanding that it's going to look different here. And we have to study all of it, whether it's the Green Book by Gaddafi, whether it's Marxism, Leninism, whether it's Deng Xiaoping theory, Baathism, Bolivarianism. We have to study all of it with the understanding that it's not going to look anything like that over here. And that what we must be obsessed with doing, we must spend every waking hour of doing, is trying to figure out what it's going to look like here. Try to piece together the formula. Try to find the forces, the social movements, the layers of society, the divisions within the ruling class that will piece together how it can happen here. And that should be what we constantly obsess with. The job of a revolutionary is to make a revolution. It's not to LARP. It's not to engage in fantasy role-playing. And so everything that we study, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, the Houthis in Yemen, the Bolivarians, the Baathists, North Korea, Juche, everything that we study must be studied with the understanding that one way or another we are going to piece together what will work here. We are going to figure out socialism with American characteristics, and we are going to make it work in this country. That is what we are going to do. And if we ever lose our focus, if we ever are thinking, oh, how can we try to form a Juche group in America? Wrong. How can we form a Maoist group in America? Wrong. How can we form a Bolivarian group in America? Wrong. The focus must always be on how we can move toward the development of our own unique brand to apply here in this country. That is what we need to do. But anyway, the theme of this live stream tonight is peace in Ukraine possible? Is it coming soon? I certainly hope so, because the war is over. The war is over. Russia has already won. The Donbass is part of Russia. Crimea is Russia. The question is, how much longer will the Ukrainian state continue to pilfer off our tax money to keep this war going? But the deeper question that's underlying all of this is, how much longer are the American people going to take this? Because we're tired of this shit. We're tired of seeing the roads in our neighborhoods crumbling with potholes while they spend billions and billions of dollars on some government on the other side of the world. We're tired of seeing prisons for profit eating up the lives of our next generation. We're tired of this. We are tired of the opioid epidemic. We're tired of having our railways and our trains derail and fall apart. We're tired of the low wages of the Biden economy. We are tired of the rising prices and Biden inflation. We're tired of this. We're tired of our government seeming indifferent to the suffering of working families. It's going to be Christmas in a few days. How many working parents are trying to figure out how they can give their kids a good Christmas in the economic atmosphere created by our warmongering banker elite? And the real question about Ukraine and the war is, how much longer are we going to tolerate a regime in Washington, D.C. that cares about giving guns and weapons to Ukrainian Nazis and doesn't care about feeding American working families? How much longer are we going to tolerate that? How much longer are we going to tolerate a country with 20 empty houses for every homeless person? A country where we've got homeless encampments in every major city. You can't drive through Portland or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago or Washington, D.C. without seeing encampments of homeless people. This country is rotting inside while our leaders are loyal to their global financial system, and they're pumping so much money into Ukraine to try and beat back the people of the world that are rejecting their system. The people of the eastern regions, the people of Donbass, have rejected their satanic world order. They created people's republics, the Donetsk People's Republics, the Lugansk People's Republic, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the Socialist Republic in Nicaragua, the Cuban Revolutionary Government, the People's Republic of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Every corner of this world, people are in revolt. The Revolutionary Committee of Yemen, the resistance in Gaza that refuses to back down. Every corner of this world, people are refusing to submit to the imperialists. And the question is, how much longer will we, the people living in this country, continue to tolerate their destruction of our very lives in order to preserve their satanic system? How much longer will we stand by and allow life to get worse for us? That's the question. So you want to know when peace will come to Ukraine? I don't know what's in the works about a peace deal. I don't know what kind of negotiations. I'm just as surprised as you to hear what we just heard from Antony Blinken about how there's no magic pot of money. I've been saying that from the beginning. There is no magic pot of money. I'm just as surprised as you. But wars like the ugly Ukraine-Donbass war, wars like what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, wars like this will continue until the bulk of the American people are brought into politics, until they take up history's challenge, until they become emboldened politically, until they decide that there is no alternative but to get involved and to join arm in arm with their brothers and sisters, until they get off of the internet and into the street, until people get out of the movement into the masses. Wars like this are going to continue. But we here have with us the revolutionary science, the teaching, the ideology, the tradition. We're studying and we're building. And our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, is marching ahead. We are doing the educational work that must be done. We are building the community that must be built. We are teaching, sharing. We are learning from the masses of people, and we are offering leadership. We are learning while leading and leading while learning. We are going from the masses to the masses, and we are offering the love that so many people are missing this holiday season. How many people this holiday season are feeling alone, feeling like no one cares for them, feeling like their family doesn't understand them or has forgotten them or has rejected them, feeling like they don't have a place in this world. We're here to tell you that we offer a love that is so powerful, a love that is so unending and so explosive that people all across the planet have given their lives to fight for it. We have something here that is dynamic, that is explosive. And if you look at what we've achieved this year, and you're going to hear my annual report in a few days, you'll see that our community, the Center for Political Innovation, is doing things and pulling creativity and passion out of people in a way that no other organization in this country at this time is capable of doing. We have an energy and a love that is unstoppable. And we need you. We need you to join our ranks. We need you to become more dedicated to helping us carry out our operations. We need you to get involved. We need you to get involved. This ain't an internet thing. Right? I might get on here and stream, and I love talking to you all, but this ain't an internet thing. This is an in real life community, a community of solidarity dedicated to building the society that we need. So I hope that you all will consider joining our ranks. And on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. I see Jamie Turner. Jamie Turner has sent a Rumble rant on the Rumble. I see on the Rockfin. Do we have anything on the Rockfin? I don't see anything on the Rockfin as of yet, but we got plenty of super chats here to answer. So names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us here tonight? Names and locations. We got Mark Jones from Utica, New York. Welcome, Mark. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. We got Rupert Fellows from England. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got Zhao in New York City. Welcome, Zhao. We got Tyler in Missouri. Welcome, Tyler. We got Shoni in Los Angeles. Welcome. We got Sherry Cape in New Jersey. We got Gonzalo Augustin in Argentina. We got New Zealand, Kiwi Dave. Mindanao to Midwest, Lumpia Logic. Love your work. You're great. We got Christopher in Texas. Neil Frazier in Hong Kong. We got Mahmoud in California. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Colin in Greensboro. Alex from Brazil. Southern California, Grady. Mariah in North Carolina. Love to all. Stephen Ann Ringgold in Georgia. Remy in Gary, Indiana. Welcome, Remy. All right, we got Georgia Vlad in Chicago. We got St. David's in Bermuda. We got Lee Stranahan is with us. He's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Welcome, Lee. Good to have you. We got Dan Newman, nice wanderer, pals, Pasadena, California. I thought I'd be out of unnamed orange beverage by now, but nope. We got Don in Thailand. Welcome, Don. Balthazar in Oakland. Welcome, Balthazar. AJ in NJ. Welcome, AJ in NJ. We got Salt Lake City, Utah, the communist majoritarian. Welcome, communist majoritarian out there in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, I should have mentioned, when the Mormons first set up shop in Utah, they had an oddly socialist economic system that they had set up. It's called United Order. You can read all about it. Obviously, they've gotten away from that, but there's nothing un-American about socialism. All right. Currently in Sydney, Australia for Christmas, says David. Welcome. I hope you have a good time out there. Moonlight Beach, California. Scott S. Oregon. Gary Sullivan is in Oregon. Welcome. Welcome, Gary. Herb Bryant says the print size in my copy was too small for sustained reading. Yes, it is indeed some small print. You're right. If we ever do another edition, we'll do bigger print. Yep, I have, says communist majoritarian. Wild times, folks. Wild times. All right. So the first super chat question is from Gala. And Gala says, do you think the European Union will lift sanctions on Russia anytime soon? Any chances of the USA normalizing with relations with Russia post-Biden? Well, I think the USA will have to normalize relations with Russia in the long term, for the simple reason that Russia has such a vibrant economy and that Russia is at the center of the BRICS. And because of that, not trading with Russia is going to hurt the United States economically. The USA is missing out on a lot of money. Now, right now, the oil monopolies in the United States and the natural gas and energy companies, they want to strangle Russia as a competitor. But I think that there is a lot of people in the industrial sector of the United States that want to keep doing business with Russia, right? Russia has titanium, Russia has uranium, Russia has materials that the USA could get. And that, just like right now, things between Venezuela and the United States are starting to thaw. They sent Alex Saab home, and they're starting to improve relations with Venezuela. They no longer recognize Alex Saab because the USA needs their oil because of the Russia situation. Well, I think give it time. There will be a rotation, and the USA will realize that, that it would be in their interest to thaw things with Russia a bit. And I think that that's going to happen. I think that's only a matter of time before that happens, Gala. And, the European Union is increasingly realizing the United States is not their friend. More and more election results in Europe bring to power independent governments that aren't thrilled, right? We have Hungary that's not going along with the European Union. We have an Italian government. It's kind of a maverick government. And I think it's only a matter of time before the new right in Europe gains more upper hand and, we see a different change. Now, Jamie Turner says, what do you say to people who claim Tara Reade's story is fake? Well, there are court records that indicate that she reported it at the time, and they've kept those sealed. In addition to that, Tara Reade's story matches up with everything that she told her coworkers, everything she told her family members at the time. In addition to that, I think it's worth pointing out that you'll notice that her story is very to the point, right? When people do a fake Me Too, and there's a lot of fake Me Tooing that goes on, and people who say, oh, that never happens, bullshit, it happens. There's a lot of fake Me Tooing happen. out there, right? But the reason that I think there's no question that Tara Reade is telling the truth is because her story is very to the point. It's this happened, and it's exactly what happened. Fake Me Too's always have a huge amount of what they're really mad about first. Fake Me Too's always have a huge amount of smearing the person's character, what a bad person the person is. And fake Me Too's tend to always have just the icing on the cake is there's always a qualifier. Maybe he meant this, or maybe he thought I consented, or, and those are the signs of a fake Me Too, right? At the end of the day, you never really know unless you were there. But I've seen a number of fake Me Too's in my life, right? What they did to Nick Brana, that's complete bullshit. It's a completely fake Me Too. And, Russell Brand, etc. And a fake Me Too, those are the three signs of a fake Me Too. One, big manifesto that says what they're really mad about, right? It's a big, huge manifesto, and it says all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do with sexual assault, has nothing to do with anything, because that's what they're really mad about, and they want to be vindicated in what they're really mad about. So that's the first sign, right? If it's huge and it's long, that people that are real victims don't feel a need to give you a novel about it. They say this is what happened, right? And that's the first sign. Second sign of a fake Me Too is a bunch of attacks on the person's character that are not related to the allegation, right? They say, oh, and he was mean to me one time. Oh, he had an argument with me one time. Oh, he did all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do, that is not necessary, right? If you're going to level a real allegation against somebody, it's about what they did. It's not about whether they're a good person or a bad person. It's about what they did. But they really want to destroy the credibility of the person to get you to believe them. So in addition to writing a whole big novel to tell you what they're really mad about, second, in a fake Me Too, they tend to, have a whole bunch of nasty attacks on the person's character, little anecdotes about things they said or ways they looked, or, just nasty attacks on the person's character. That's the second sign of a fake Me Too. Third sign of a fake Me Too is that they throw qualifiers in there because nobody likes to lie. And in a lot of cases, these people have lawyered up and they don't want to get prosecuted if somehow, it comes out. And so there'll be a lot of, well, I don't know. I can't tell. I mean, with the Nick Brana thing, this is how I know Nick Brana is innocent, is that I was listening to one of the people who was backing up the accuser. And she said, I walked in on him kissing her one time and it looked like maybe it was not consensual. And that was the basis of her believing. And I heard that. I heard a certain person, I'm not even going to say who, I heard her saying that in an interview. And I thought, this is such fucking bullshit. She said she walked in on Nick kissing somebody and she wasn't sure, like maybe it was not consensual, but she didn't know. And I heard an endless amount of backtrack. And I thought, this is bullshit, right? Look, rape is rape. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Okay. And both of those things are very, very serious things that should always be taken seriously. Rape is rape and sexual assault is sexual assault. However, other things can be inappropriate, can be wrong, but when you get into the area of other things, when you get into the area of other things, is it possible that people do things that are completely inappropriate? Absolutely. That are not rape, that are not sexual assault? Absolutely, right? But when you get into the area of other things, you're talking about something different. And, one of the things that I have heard many feminists and rape survivors say is that one of the things that they really don't appreciate about Me Too is that Me Too has led to a situation where other things that might be inappropriate get wrapped up in the same category as rape and sexual assault. Rape and sexual assault are very clear and very serious things. Other things that might be inappropriate are not rape and not sexual assault. And there is a clear difference between the two. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Rape is rape. And all kinds of other things that are not appropriate, all kinds of other things that is a very different category. You cannot equate those with each other. And that is what the Me Too culture has done. And that, rape is rape, sexual assault is sexual assault, and other things, can be wrong. can be highly inappropriate, and people can definitely do things that are not rape and that are not sexual assault that are still wrong. But they're not rape and they're not sexual assault. And the fact that frequently I will see all over the internet people that are not accused of rape, people that are not accused of sexual assault, be accused of that on Twitter when people haven't bothered to even read what the actual allegations are, shows you how dangerous Me Too is. Right? I mean, take the case of that comedian guy. What's his name? Louis C.K. Was he wrong to do what he did? Yes. Right? He said to various women, "Can I do this in front of you?" They all said yes, and he did, but he still shouldn't have said that. Right? He was a famous comedian. They were not. He made a mistake. He was wrong to do what he did. You don't do things like that at work, but he's not a rapist. And he didn't commit sexual assault. He did something inappropriate. He did something he shouldn't have done. But the idea that, somebody's saying, "Hey, can I do this in front of you?" And you say yes, and they do it, is the same as rape, is the same as sexual assault. That's not the same thing. But if you get all over Twitter, you will see people saying Louis C.K., rapist. Nope, false. Louis C.K. committed sexual assault. False. Nope. Louis C.K. engaged in consensual activities that were inappropriate. He brought his sex life into the workplace. He brought his sex life into situations with people where it was not appropriate to do so. That's not saying that there's no accountability for doing things, but that is not sexual assault. If you say, "Can I do this?" and someone says yes, and then you do it, that is not sexual assault. If you say, "Can I do something in front of you?" and someone says yes, and you do it, that is definitely not rape. He didn't rape anybody. He didn't sexually assault anybody. He did something wrong, right? I mean, from what I understand, Louis C.K. is an exhibitionist. Apparently, according to Sarah Silverman, they used to, when they were friends, Sarah Silverman, the comedian, said that when they were friends, they would dare each other to run naked through the lobby of her apartment and stuff. And I mean, it sounds like he gets off on revealing himself. Well, that's unfortunate. I feel sorry for him. And it's probably rooted in childhood trauma. That's probably rooted in some deep pain and scar that this man has that motivates his sexual desires to be abnormal. But that's not rape. And I mean, if he didn't have the amount of self-control to be appropriate with it, that's really sad. And, obviously accountability of some degree is in order, but, the fact that Louis C.K. being inappropriate has been equated with rape, that's not rape. Louis C.K. being inappropriate has been equated with sexual assault. That is not sexual assault. And a lot of these stories, and it's weird because, I've investigated many of the different Me Too's. And a lot of the Me Too's are not what they appear to be. Not that there's not impropriety. There's usually some kind of impropriety in a Me Too case. There's usually, you dated somebody you shouldn't have dated. You hit on somebody in the workplace, which you're not supposed to do, which you should not do, right? You were romantic with somebody in your organization you shouldn't have been. So there's usually some poor judgment, misconduct that went on. Okay, right? But rape is rape. Sexual assault is sexual assault. And Me Too has created this atmosphere where all of them are equated with each other. And everyone is, the second anyone on the internet complains about a person, they're immediately a rapist. And that's just not how these things work. In fact, some things are true and some things are not. Louis C.K. is not a rapist. He's just not a rapist, right? I mean, he's not, right? Did he do something inappropriate? Yes. Is he a rapist? No. He's not, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's just like, and the way the internet works, right, is, I mean, I'm at the point, I don't care. I just block people. But if I were to tweet out right now, Louis C.K. is not a rapist, there would be hundreds of people tweeting at me, "Oh my God, you're a rape apologist. You're defending a pervert. Oh my God." And it's like, no, I just made a statement of fact. No one ever accused Louis C.K. of rape. No one ever accused Louis C.K. of sexual assault. They accused him of doing something inappropriate. And, there are many women out there, many women out there that really experienced rape. There are many women out there that have really been sexually assaulted. And the Me Too internet culture has cheapened what those women have been through. and has equated all kinds of people that would never do anything like that with those women, with what those women went through. And it's disgusting. It's frankly disgusting. And, you know, it is using the trauma that many women have really experienced. And it's weaponizing that. It's weaponizing that. You know, because many women in our society have been through awful, horrific experiences. You know, and, you know, we know that sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape, these are awful, awful things. And for political reasons, they have weaponized it. You'll notice that the Me Too movement started when Donald Trump was president and ended when Joe Biden got nominated. Why? Because Donald Trump is notoriously inappropriate with women, and so is Joe Biden. And so the Democrats started Me Too to go after Trump, and then they ended it the second Joe Biden became their nominee. Because Joe Biden is notoriously inappropriate as well. And all the people that were screaming, believe women, suddenly they don't believe Tara Reade. All they had to say with Tara Reade was Russia. Right? That they found some place where she said something nice about Putin on the internet or something. So all they had to do, as soon as Tara Reade came forward with her story, which is verified by her friends and her relatives who were all there at the time, and it's not, you know, he did something inappropriate. It's not, no, it's a very clear, straight up story of straight up blatant sexual assault. The second Tara Reade came out with it, they said Russia, and then all of a sudden, believe women went out the window, right? Apparently, according to Bill Maher and according to mainstream media, believe women stops the second Russia gets involved. Russia has nothing to do with whether or not Joe Biden sexually assaulted Tara Reade. It has nothing to do with it. Right? But the fact that they could say that, the fact that even came up with Tara Reade, the fact that the second Tara Reade came out with her allegation, which she'd made at the time, which she told all her friends about, she has collaborating evidence of everything. The second it came out, mainstream media that's constantly saying, believe women, believe women, believe women. Oh, believe women about Louis C.K. Oh, believe women. You know, don't ask questions. Immediately destroy the career of anybody. And then Tara Reade comes out and they're like, Russia. Oh, Russia is the anecdote to believe women. Give me a break. And I am not belittling sexual harassment. I am not belittling sexual assault. And I'm not belittling rape. I'm not belittling what women have gone through. I am belittling an establishment that has taken an awful thing and a serious issue and cheapened it. And cheapened it for political gain and political manipulation. And I have watched this so many times now, and I have sat back and, you know, it's like every socialist group in the world falls apart over one of these stories. I know the Workers' World Party collapsed in 2017 over something. I don't even know what the allegation was. I have heard so many different versions of it. But the organization imploded. You know, it's funny. I was out of the group in 2015 and I was mad. I was mad that I was out of the group. And then people started calling me from around the country and telling me what was happening. And I thought, geez, it's good thing I left. Shit, you know, I thought it was bad when I was in it, you know, but it was clear that whatever happened in Baltimore, I don't even know what it was. Honestly, I think it was somebody in the group had done something with somebody before they joined, or I don't even know. Whatever it was not going to end until the group was destroyed. And they pretty much destroyed the group. From what I understand, Workers' World Party has like 30 members at this point, maybe 40, right? It was like 300 when I was in it. I mean, the group that Baltimore is left, Los Angeles is left, Detroit is out. You know, I mean, the group is pretty much dead. Right? You know, and it's pretty much dead. There was violence between members. And what's also scary, and you should all know, is that one of the people who was very key and inciting all the insanity that led to the Workers' World Party collapsing. They haven't had a public conference, right? They used to have a national conference every year. They have not had one since 2017, right? The person who led to that happening moved on to the Communist Party. And she's one of the main people who is obsessed with destroying this organization, CPI, inside the Communist Party, right? She's one of the main people that has been involved in trying to destroy the Communist Party, and in trying to incite the Communist Party against us, etc. And, you know, something's going on there. And I don't know what's going on there, but I don't think the Communist Party would have let her switch parties and not Google her, would have let her switch parties and not find out that she presided over the demolition of the Workers' World Party, you know. So something's going on there, and I don't know what, but there's more to it than just, you know, that just she presided over wrecking the Workers' World Party and switched parties. There's more going on there. There is a lot more, you know, inside baseball going on there. And, you know, I'm not saying her name here tonight, but I'm telling you, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on than just she switched the parties, you know. You know, when people are very, very good at wrecking organizations, one thing I'll tell you about, right, is that, I mean, one thing that this person did, they joined the Workers' World Party and suddenly they wanted to monitor everyone's social media. They wanted to monitor everyone's social media and start making rules about what people could say on their social media and what they couldn't. Very sketch. And if somebody comes into your organization and suddenly wants to regulate and control and publish social media guidelines, that's an alarm bell. And they want to publish social media guidelines. And yeah, this is, watch out for it, right? Watch out for it. The internet's not real, folks. I'm just telling you, the internet isn't real. The internet is not real, right? The Center for Political Innovation, we just had a huge convention in Portland. Over 150 people there, huge crowd of people. We have a list. I am making a video, my video message, and I'm going over everything we've accomplished this year. And it's like longer than any other year of our organization's existence combined. But all over the internet, I see prominent people tweeting out all the time that CPI doesn't exist anymore. It's not real. You know, CPI just dissolved. Oh, CPI dissolved. It's no longer around. No, we're around. We exist, you know. But the internet isn't real. And on the internet that's not real, we don't exist anymore. But in real life, we very, very, very clearly do exist. You know, I'll show you. This is Scott Ritter. We just posted the video today. If you haven't had a chance to watch it here on the YouTube channel, give it a watch. But Scott Ritter spoke at our convention. And he gave an amazing speech. You know, he gave an amazing speech. And, you know, I mean, does this look not real to you? Does this organization look dissolved? Does it look not real? All right. Don't know what's taking it so long for the video to. The U.S. has children in the.
About that.
Scott. Inspector, a great hero, an advocate of peace, someone who's been exposing the truth and telling so many people what they need to hear about what's been happening lately in Gaza, but also about what's been happening with Russia and China, and a voice that needs to be heard. We've got Scott Ritter here, and we're honored to have Scott Ritter. Scott.
Thank you very much. Say what? Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Wow, that's all I can say about that. And the fact that you used my name in association with that song is touching. I want to thank Jetta for introducing us, Elizabeth, Caleb, all of CPI, hungry newborn in the form of an Israeli state that defines itself by this very ideology. Now, I have come to this issue late in life. I'm a disarmament guy. I'm a Russia guy. I'm not an Israeli-Palestinian guy. I spent a lot of time in Israel in the 90s working with the Israeli government trying to stop weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and I learned to love Israel at that time. But the Israel that I fell in love with was the Israel of Yitzhak Rabin, the Israel of a prime minister who recognized that the path Israel was on was incompatible to long-term peace and prosperity, and that there had to be a way of relating with the Palestinians that gave them a state, a two-state solution, something that said, this is yours, this is ours, we will be equals upon this. It wasn't perfect. I know people out there will point to Oslo 1 and Oslo 2 and say, it wasn't perfect. No, it wasn't. It's a hell of a lot better than what we got going on right now. At least you had an Israeli prime minister who said, I believe in peace. He didn't just say, I believe in peace. He said, I am willing to die for peace. Imagine that. An Israeli leader who said, I am willing to die for peace. I am willing to die for peace with the Palestinians. He said that the day before he was assassinated on November, I believe, 4th or 5th of 1995. 4th. Who killed him? A Palestinian? A member of Hamas? No. A right-wing Orthodox Jew who took his orders to assassinate from a rabbi who quoted not the Torah but the Talmud and said that Yitzhak Rabin had somehow turned his back on the Jewish faith and therefore he must be killed. And so they killed him. They killed him. And Israel has never been the same because who took over from Yitzhak Rabin was Benjamin Netanyahu. And Benjamin Netanyahu empowered this poisonous ideology to become what Israel is today. Not a nation that's seeking peace, but a nation that only exists for war against the Palestinian people. The Israeli state is an evil state. The Israeli state today is a tyrannical state. It's a state that must be opposed violently because they chose war. It wasn't the Palestinian people that chose war. Israel chose war. Just like it wasn't the Minutemen at Concord and Lexington that said, we choose war. It was thrust upon them by the tyranny of the British Crown. And so when you take a look at October 7th and what happened on October 7th, don't believe that history began that day. It didn't. October 7th was the manifestation of 7+ decades of apartheid-driven hate between the Israelis and the Palestinians that manifested itself violently throughout that time period. Gaza was not a land where Palestinians lived in peace. It was an open-air concentration camp. And if you ask yourself, if you lived in that, if you were an inmate in this concentration camp, a prisoner, what would you do to liberate yourself? What would you do to free yourself? Hold another demonstration? Hold a rally. That'll do it. The Israelis will definitely listen to the rally. No, you do what all people who yearn to be free do. You stand up and you fight for yourselves. You know, Pierce Morgan, you're allowed to boo and hiss at this point, has made a reputation lately by having people on his show, and they'll say, but will you condemn Hamas? That's his question. Will you condemn Hamas? Hey, Pierce, invite me. I'll give you the answer. Hell no. I don't condemn Hamas. I support Hamas. Why? Because Hamas stands for the freedom of the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people have every right to fight for their freedom, to struggle for their freedom, just like Americans did back in the day. Right. They are the modern day incarnation of the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord. They speak a different language, they support a different cause, but the freedoms they seek are the same. Right. And these are freedoms that can't be granted by a rally or a gathering. They can only be given by those who are willing to sacrifice in that cause. And the Palestinians today are struggling. They are sacrificing for this cause. We as a peace movement, it's not our war. It's not. They have to earn this. And my God, they are earning it. That's right. The sacrifices that they are making, the courage they are showing in the face of insurmountable odds. What is our role here? To support them, yes. But we have to position ourselves so that when the fighting finally ends, and it will end, ladies and gentlemen, and Hamas will not be defeated. When it ends, we are prepared to find a path towards peace. That America stops being the nation that promotes war and starts being the nation that promotes peace. That is the role of an American anti-war movement today.
So yeah, go watch the rest of that speech. I posted it, and on the CPI YouTube channel, we got Garland's speech is up, Syed Husseini's speech is up, and Peter is working really, really hard. Shout out to you, Peter. Peter, our good member, not Peter Coffin, Peter, our other member. He's working really, really hard to get those speeches up there, and we appreciate it because we had an amazing conference. We've got three of the great talks plus the opening ceremony and Jeddah's amazing introduction. We got all of that up there, and we got plenty more. There's plenty more where that came from. So great stuff. Great stuff. All right. Can Mexico become a first world nation? Yes. Yes. The gap between the first world and the third world is rapidly changing. And I believe that Mexico, under the leadership that it's got now, but under global circumstances where it's getting closer to China and Russia and, development and trade, I believe, yes, that absolutely Mexico could become a first world nation. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Lee. We do appreciate the super chat. Much love to you. You're a great friend of our community. Different beliefs, and that's fine, right? We want to work with anybody. We want to work with anybody. And we really do appreciate you, Lee. You are really a treasure, right? You are somebody from the conservative libertarian side of things who understands that now more than ever, we need to come together. There's a fake left and a fake right, and we're against both. So there we go. Hi, Caleb. What do you think of China leasing Gaza the way England leased Hong Kong? They could rebuild the infrastructure while providing security. Well, that'd be a great deal, but I doubt the Israelis would ever agree to it, right? The Israelis, every time the Palestinians want to start building themselves up and developing, they find a way to call it terrorism, and they move in there and they just clear it out and they destroy it. They will not allow there to be a prosperous society in Gaza. That sounds like a great idea, and if Israel could somehow have its arm twisted and be forced to agree to that, that would be a great step forward. I just don't see it happening. I'll just be honest with you. I just don't see that happening. But it'd be great if it did, and that China would love to do that. China's all about building peace through economic development. In New Zealand, the top 511 citizens have as much wealth as the bottom 2.5 million in a total population of just 4 million. Does this mean New Zealand is an oligarchy? No, it just sounds like you're a capitalist country. A small group of people control the means of production. And with their control of the means of production, they're able to make exponentially more wealth because they live by owning rather than by working. The bulk of the population are workers who live by working. But the ruling class, they live by owning, right? And the inequality level that you're describing there is about normal for a capitalist country. Now, to be fair, though, we're not worried about the redistribution of income. We're trying to change property relations. We want a society where the centers of economic power are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. But we're not trying to redistribute income, right? And income redistribution happens to some degree or other in every country. New Zealand has much more of a welfare state than most Western countries, right? It's got national health care, free college, et cetera. So, redistribution of income is something that capitalist countries often do just as a matter of trying to stabilize society. We are for a change in ownership of the means of production so that the centers of economic power are forced to work in the interest of society overall. And on that note, folks, I wish you all a happy Merry Christmas. I'll be back maybe tomorrow, maybe not. We'll see. We'll see what the plan is for tomorrow, but I'll be back soon. I do appreciate all your support, and I'll be back, and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Oh, real quick, before I go, all right, if any of you want to reach me, my email is calebmaupin@gmail.com. And that is my email address. So if any of you wish to comment, people have been sending me a lot of emails lately. I've been reading them. And if you want to send a contribution to me and my family, for the holiday season, I know there's a lot of people who want to do that. I received a great contribution today from a fan or a friend, a member of the CPI, but he wanted to help my wife and I out. And we really appreciate that. And if anyone wants to send a contribution through Zelle, they can do it that way. Or if you'd like to send some kind of contribution to help the work that we're doing here through Cash App, you can do it this way also. Right. And I do appreciate everything. I do appreciate all of you and all of that. So if you want to send a contribution through Cash App, just, money sign, $, Caleb Maupin 22. You can send a contribution via Cash App. as well, right? If you want to, you're just giving people the option, right? Someone suggested that I do this, and yeah, if you'd like to send a contribution, those are the two ways you can do it. You can Zelle me at calebmaupin@gmail, or you can Cash App me at calebmaupin22. It would be appreciated, as you know, I'm trying to figure things out here. It's a little bit rough, but I've got some plans for the new year and different strategies. But you know, anything you can do to help would be appreciated. Yeah, on that note, join the Center for Political Innovation, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas. I'm thinking I'm going to do some mega streaming on Christmas itself. I'll get back to you about the details of that. It looks like we're going to do a mega stream on Christmas, just because our Thanksgiving mega stream was so exciting and so popular. Yeah, we'll keep doing that. So yeah, I'm going to put on the closing music. Let's go. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.